Maybe you could start by telling us what you like about philosophy.
Okay, so philosophy is always for me a very practical subject. I like especially being able to think about the good life. Sounds rather trite in some ways, but it was Aristotle's beginning point, so I think it's good enough for me. And I like thinking about what sorts of activities and what sorts of uh, things one does with others make for a good life. And so actually being able to read Aristotle with students is a wonderful way of tackling that question and thinking that it was live for him back then, and that it wasn't just about being, but it was about doing, and doing when the conditions weren't always as propitious as they might be.
And so do you think that it has helped you live better, or a good life, or a better life, perhaps?
To some degree, I think I've lived a better life insofar as it's been reflective. It's probably also been too reflective at times, over-intellectualized. Hence, I dance, as in the topic of today's talk. And I take care of the body as well as the mind, as Plato reminded us was important, and think there's a connection there. But yeah, I think it gives you a chance to get some perspective on life a bit, and think about political constitutions that are worth living in, and the kinds of ultimate values that we want to promote. It's, in current years, it's been a wonderful forum for just introductory students to think about issues such as race, gender, issues to do with the place of emotions in the good life, as this series is about, the bias toward reason, and in fact ways of not bifurcating as either or emotion and reason. So those are things that it would be hard to take up in a more general way, but through philosophy.
I know that your recent book with Oxford University Press is called After War, Healing the Moral Wounds of Our Soldiers. And so you're going to be talking about dancing and soldiers this evening. I wonder if you could say a little bit more about that.
So how do dancers and soldiers show the dance floor? Well, they actually did in the court of Louis the XIV. He was a ballet dancer as well as the king with a presence. And so courtroom etiquette and the danse de la cour, the courtroom dance, for him became elevated into ballet, ordinary gestures, such as the way you present yourself to a king, how you approach the king in second position, so that your body is looking at him, but you and you don't change your gaze, or if you're a lesser person, you do skid along the sides of the room. Or maybe you have FSA, a turned face. And so all of that was very useful for courtroom etiquette. And so dance, in a sense, was the honing of the gestures of courtroom etiquette. But he then brought the dance to the battlefield, into the parade field, so that people were learning how to move together as a cadre or as a corps. With maneuvering and the fine synchronies and attunements that go in keeping a corps together in time, but also keeping a cadre together in time. And so I think a lot of the corporeal communication that's in building a corps, whether it's a dance corps or a marine corps, are very similar. And that's part of what I want to talk about, is the social cognition and social connection, as well as emotional attunements that go in with moving together.
I wonder whether you feel like you express yourself better through philosophy or through dance.
Well, I'm not that great a dancer. I'm not a professional dancer. I've just danced since graduate school, even actually in Edinburgh, with a fellow philosopher. I took modern dance classes.
Mentioning no names.
That name would be Neil Tennant.
Oh, right. Fantastic.
A logician who was at Edinburgh when I was a graduate student there. I did an MLit in Edinburgh. And so I've danced a lot. I've even danced here at the London School of Contemporary Dance when I lived here, and I was a student for a while at UCL as well, for a part of the time. And so it's been with me as in a dilettante-ish way. And I've never quite understood the expression in dance, but I know it makes me feel very happy when I dance. And I very much like the awareness of other people in the room. And you dance with others, and every dance form is different. Tango is very, very much about partnering. It's following and leading, and the tiniest movement of the body, a tiny breath one way or another, is a cue to your partner as to which way to go. And so that's very tight attunement. And so the thought about it, I've worked on emotions most of my professional career in Aristotle and elsewhere. And so the very thought of being able to think of emotions not just in facial expression, which is the sort of thing Paul Ekman does, and static faces often, smiles and downturned brow and crow's feet around your eyes, that kind of thing, all the musculature of the face that moves its face to express emotions and make them readable to others, as well as maybe give you afferent feedback. I was more interested in, well, what about dynamic movement of the body proper and not just of the face? So that's sort of how I started thinking about it.
So I suppose one question which comes out of that is whether or not you think that it's possible to do intellectual labour through dance, so emotional or kind of academic.
Well, I think it's a good question. I think we now understand that expertise and technique, skill is not just mechanical. It gets to where it has to be through a lot of analysis and correction and not blind copying. On the other hand, there is a lot of, you might say, muscle memory. That's sort of a metaphor for the way in which you can learn in your body kinesthetically, proprioceptively, and interoceptively what you're doing, and not necessarily have to look at what you're doing, but know through feedback where how high your leg is and how low it is. And so there's a lot of ways in which you do analyze that afterwards. The attitude wasn't right, the arabesque wasn't quite right, I wasn't in time with someone else. That's quite intellectual. A different subject would be the way in which dance expresses emotion, or the way in which we understand dance through neuroscience, and the way in which people can read each other's body cues and perhaps know each other's minds through tuning themselves to what they're doing at similar times or in synchronization. Certainly that's an intellectual topic.
So moving from muscle memory to philosophical memory, what's your earliest philosophical recollection?
Oh dear. Why? But why? But why? That's one of the series that goes back to probably at some point in early childhood God. Maybe it ended there, but or just began there. I also was absolutely taken by the question of what makes for a human being. And I probably was in high school, and so that took me to, at the time, reading Freud and interpretation of dreams, and I thought that would be an interesting start. But when I got to college, I went to Bryn Mawr College, a women's college on the East Coast. Psychology was very much rat psychology, so I studied that for a while, and I found it actually quite boring to do Skinnerian labs with mice. I did have a mouse named Absalom because I was reading Faulkner at the time. And so then I moved to actually anthropology. I thought that would be the place where I would answer the question. But they did bones and fossils, so that wasn't quite right. It was physical anthropology. Then I moved to political science, thinking, I'll learn about cultures, but that was primarily quantitative political science, and that wasn't quite right. So I got to philosophy through political philosophy, actually, and also through Aristotle. Aristotle's Metaphysics, Book 7, what is it to be, and the being, the tatienenai, the what it is to be question, the essence of a substance, and that kind of set me off in some direction or other.